people are just so friendly and nice and giving. If you put yourself out there, you'll be rewarded, I think.
I knew that people were good, and I knew from Baja, especially over the years, how kind people are. But I think that's what's been driven home in so much travel. Or even in the middle of the night and somebody walks up to your truck, your first instinct might be fear, and it definitely is logical to be a little fearful, especially in the middle of the night. But it's always turned out to be somebody concerned about us, wondering if we needed anything, letting us know that we can camp at their house, you should come by for coffee or to get some breakfast, or that the town is having an event next week. You know, we've been to people's birthday parties that we don't know. we've you know, so many of these things. And I think throughout the trip as we traveled, we opened up more and more.
Listening to the GHT Overland podcast.
You're awesome, and we appreciate you being part of the crew. Let's blaze new trails together, throwing up dust and mud as we tackle new adventures. Be sure to tag us on the social medias so we can see what kind of awesomeness you're up to.
Hashtag GHT Overland.
The GHT Overland podcast is all about learning together from a tribe of experienced overland travel adventure addicts, sharing their stories, experiences, with a few good laughs in between.
This episode is brought to you by GHT Overland. Please keep in mind we'd love your support. Keeping all the algorithm spirits happy is kind of necessary. So if you would, at a minimum, Level 1 Love is taking a second to leave a rating on iTunes or the podcast platform you listen on. Anything from a short little I like it to whatever you're feeling. Without constant love from you, we're just sludge at the bottom of a lost cold coffee cup. Level 2 Love is found on GHToverland.com. This is where we maintain a list of recommended apps, books, and gear. Thank you to everyone who has used these links. This also helps us earn a commission, costing you nothing extra. Level 3 Love is on Patreon. This is your opportunity to support the GHT Overland podcast with monthly little thank yous that help us pay web hosting fees, podcast hosting, and all the things that keep the podcast growing and improving. This is also how you get your hands on some sweet swag. GHT stands for gratitude, humility, and tenacity. These are our 3 primary pillars of life. Taking it to the next level, we're adding in the rest of our pillars. With love at the core, purpose is our foundation, and no matter the obstacle or challenge, we always continue to move forward. So, if you were or were not wondering, this is the mysterious little logo you sometimes see in a post, on a video, and tattoos. Thank you for joining us as we pursue a renewed life mission of putting the best in people and nature on display while tackling the ugly Goliath of today by consistently placing positivity and respect for others in front of everything else.
Those times you have the opportunity to interview the same people who have been your inspiration is quite the opportunity. A couple who's not just inspirational, but grounded, humble overland travelers who have vast experience together. We're all fortunate that they share the experiences and adventure travels of overlanding the world on YouTube. Tim and Kelsey spent plenty of time racing in Baja before they built their 1995 Toyota Land Cruiser FZJ80 to tackle the Pan Am, affectionately known as Goose. After reaching Ushuaia and heading north for the first time since leaving their home in Arizona, they returned home, purchased a new overland truck, and headed north to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska.
It was awesome to catch up with Tim and Kelsey of Dirt Sunrise. If you haven't already, this is a YouTube channel you should follow without delay. Tim and Kelsey are the foundation that keep our dreams in reach, so clearly we can't say enough good things about them. Get ready for an informative, fun chat with this week's guest, Pan American conquerors and all-around awesome people.
The last time we chatted was, I think it was March 2019, and you guys were episode 66 and 67. So that was a little bit ago. Then I believe we met at the Northwest Overland Rally. Was that like July of 2019?
I think it was.
That sounds right.
There,
yeah, I can't remember. I know it was that summer because we had just worked Expo, I think, Expo West, maybe something like that, and then we headed up there for the BC and then also the Washington.
Yeah, so that was super cool. You guys were just super friendly. We just so appreciate how warm and welcoming you were to two absolute strangers that just think you're rock stars.
Thank you. It's really nice to meet people that we get to talk to, but finally get to meet people in person. It's always nice.
I know, right? So much of our friendships now are all online because we're off in the truck somewhere. So it's fun when you actually get to meet up.
Yeah, that was super cool. So it's been like a couple years. We've been vicariously living through you. So hopefully that's not too creepy. And then we've got like COVID and all kinds of stuff. You guys, I believe after the Northwest Overland Rally, or when you were done doing expos and stuff, you then returned to South America to finish the Pan Am. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think where the truck was that time. I think Lima, Peru. That was the big trip home. So yeah, the truck was parked in the basement, like 3 floors beneath the Marriott of Lima. We didn't get to stay at the Lima Marriott, but Goose did. And then we picked him up and continued zigging and zagging south, I think, from there.
So Goose was living it good.
He had the best real estate there in Lima, I think.
He barely fit in that parking garage.
Yeah. We had to air him down to like 3 or 4 PSI, but we got him in.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's awesome. So I can only imagine, like, when you guys finished the trip, you got as far south as Goose could possibly take you. Can you like walk us through that moment, that feeling? And I think it was a bunch of, I don't know why I remember this, like yellow dandelions or some kind of yellow flowers, like everywhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere either at that naval station or somewhere close by.
It was wild because I think, at some point the trip was just the trip and you're just traveling and you're traveling every day. And at least for me, I don't think it hit me that like this is technically kind of that goal, right? Anything from here on is sort of heading back. It's all new, in Chile and all that was amazing, but this is the spot you thought you'd never get to. And you're an hour maybe down this dirt road from being there. And like, it was definitely a wild thing to hit and go, wait a minute, that's it. Like we did it, and it was just, it kind of was overwhelming just because I don't think in our minds we had it planned. Like we're about to the southern tip, and here we go. Like I don't know. I wasn't emotionally ready for it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those moments that happens and you're kind of realizing what's happening, and at the same time it's just another moment. But you kind of realize that it should be a big moment maybe, and it felt big, but also I don't think we were quite realizing at that time. It wasn't hitting us like this is the end. And then I think we went to that field with all the flowers, found a pretty spot to have lunch or something. And then you kind of start to think about it, like we were there and now we've turned around. It's only, we've only turned around for a couple miles, but we're heading north now. We've been heading south this whole time and we did it and now we're done. But we're not done because we still have a lot of traveling in front of us. But it was a weird feeling.
Well, I think it was kind of neat in a way that the pressure we put on ourselves to make it in an old truck was kind of off. We made it. And it's like, well, now we're just exploring. I don't know. Where do you want to go? And all of the trip was really just exploring. But I didn't realize there was like a looming weight of is it going to make it? Is something going to happen? Are you going to run out of money? Is the engine just going to seize? I mean, anything could happen. And the moment we hit that was just kind of like, oh, well, I don't know. Where do you want to go, left or right? And it was kind of like a good feeling of pressure off, and like there isn't a destination now. Now it's just, I think eventually we should get to one of the towns where the flights and the shipping home is cheaper. So we'll just zig and zag until we get to one of those.
That's so awesome. How long did you guys take to get there? Like from the time you left and sold your house and did all those things, what was that time period?
It was just about 2.5, I think.
Yeah. Not fully on the road because we came back for a month or a couple months.
The trip where we met up with you guys was the longest trip home, and that was almost 3 months. It was like 2 3/4 months because we kept having opportunities to make some money, and then we weren't paying to store Goose. That was like a friend of a friend of a friend knew an employee at the Marriott in Lima. Sweet. So we were like, this is the time to fill the travel fund. And so the other trips home sometimes was like literally 1 week or 5 days to go work, like Expo East. They flew us back. And so we were like, boom, there, work, fly back. Another time we flew to Panama to see family, and a bunch of our family flew south. We flew north. So there was like a week here and there that we weren't on the road, but otherwise it was,
So I'd say just over a little over 2 years.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you planned this, and then like, how much longer was it that you had planned it? Like for us, we've been planning what we're about to do for 3-5, a long ass time. How long were you guys planning this before you actually hit the road and did it?
It's tough. I think like in different levels, I've been, since before Expo started and stuff, you read books and you hear about things. I remember reading Ted Simon's book a long time ago and going, I won't be able to do that, but that's so cool to read about. And then I don't know what it was, if it was kind of meeting guys who had done it and going, wait, you did that? And so maybe a different trip. Maybe they did like London to Cape Town and stuff. And then Expo was big for me just because I was at a place where you're training people, but then you meet someone who you trained and they went and did it. And you went, wait a minute, you knew nothing. Yeah. And then you went and did it and you came back and you're telling me about your trip. That's like full circle. And, it just made it more possible, and it kept making both of us really, once we met each other, going, why not? Like we didn't think we'd own this old vintage car and then go on a big road trip. And then we didn't think we'd do this. We didn't think we'd do that. It was like building, I think. So for us, really the true planning was only 1 year, I'd say. Like
I think we sat down and decided, like, are we going to do this or not? And Tim was like, we should put a date on the calendar and try to stick to it. And so we did. And that was about a year that we gave ourselves to like hardcore prepare, sell off stuff, get the truck ready.
I think I was scared that we could let the date just constantly move out, because it never, logically, there's never a day where you go, well, it's definitely the day to live in a truck and not have good health insurance.
Like
and
everything's perfect.
Stop getting paychecks when showing up reliably, and we should get rid of those paychecks, and we should definitely live in our, it doesn't ever hit. And so I was scared that if we didn't set a date, it could just extend forever. And then I had friends who had health issues, and I was like, well, that could happen to any of us. And so I think that for us, that date was like, basically we said today, a year from now. And then it was like a couple weeks later, we're like, are we really doing this? And then it was like, well, then we better sell that motorcycle, and we better sell that one, and we better, we better do this and we better do that. And once we were taking actions to leave, it became much more real.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that's got to really light your fire. If you're doing training at Expo and then you're training someone and then you see them another year or two down the road and they've actually gone out and done some kind of a trip. At least for me, that would definitely light my fire. Like, we need to actually do this. Other people are doing it, so it obviously can be done.
Yeah.
Totally. And it was full circle. We got to meet up with the person that we had trained. We met up with him in Bolivia, I think.
Yeah.
He had come home,
sweet.
And he had been, he has a business up in Canada, and he was back at it, for a while. And then he flew back to his truck, and he's reaching out to us, and he's like, hey, are you guys in Bolivia? And I got to meet up with the person who, at least in a sense, he was excited to meet us because he goes, the first time I ever put my truck in 4-wheel drive was in your class, and he was showing me photos from that class. And we're like, yeah, well, you may not realize it, but you and others are who made us finally go, so why aren't we able to do this? Like, so
what are we waiting
cool.
for? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So while we're on the kind of the subject, would you guys, based on current conditions in like the world with COVID and just all the uncertainty, would you today redo that trip? Would you head to South America again, especially Colombia and South?
Yeah, I think I really would. We we're not as finger on the pulse as we were when we were mid-trip, because then you just almost magically find all the other people who are traveling. You search for a hashtag about a certain mountain that you want to visit, and you realize someone just tagged it yesterday, and you go, hey, they look like they're from Canada. Let me send them a message. So when you're on it, you really know what's happening. But from other friends who are sort of mid-trip and got stuck during COVID, it seems like things are opening. I'd have no fears in terms of, anything like the governments or anything. You still can't go to Venezuela. It's sort of like the same countries we went to are still the ones that you can go to. But there are some border issues right now where I can't remember exactly the ones, but a couple weeks ago I noticed one was about to open, and then with the new variant, they kind of said not for now. So some of the land borders are closed, but it seems like to me, pretty much from here down to Panama, we've had friends drive north and make it through. So with tests and with, vaccination cards, I think it would all be doable. So to me, and Mexico's so big that I don't think we could have spent enough time.
No, and I think when you're flexible and traveling, that if you get, maybe you have to spend even another month in a country, and that's okay. As long as you're flexible with your time and you're not in a rush or anything, it's not a big deal to get, in a sense, stuck in a country.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how we look at traveling now, is it's not like we need to be here right now and cross the border on this date. And it's like, if that changes, so be it. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. And we noticed too that sitting still is actually one of the cheapest things we can do. At first, it was hard for us to really realize that, because we thought we have a year off from work, because that was the original plan, is come back in a year and get back to work. So it was sort of rush. And as we slowed down, we realized that really the driving is what burns a lot of money. It's fuel. And so if we sit still in a relatively cheap place, we actually aren't spending that much money. And so I think when you get stuck somewhere, if you know that it's actually quite inexpensive to be stuck somewhere, as long as you find, a place to camp that's cheap or free, you sort of figure out where you like to eat, which places are inexpensive. So for us, the slowing down has become a really cheap way to save money. And then when you need to make miles, that's when you really burn the money, I think.
Mm-hmm.
A conversation with a guy we had over the weekend in Bend seemed to be the classic conversation we've been having. And maybe the same thing when you guys got started. We're, excited, telling him about our plans and what we're going to do. And he just kind of looks at us like, you're going to go past Colombia? Are you sure? And I'm like, Lisa gives me the look, and I'm like, well, I think so. So like, I don't know. I guess you just kind of either do it or do more research and make sure that your safety isn't in question, right?
Yeah, and I think that other travelers will make it really clear to you. I mean, for us, we immediately discount sort of anyone's look that they give us, or if they say something. The amount of times we met up with somebody in Panama, and it was when we were visiting family, so it was a very tourist heavy sort of like resort, in was it Costa Rica maybe?
Yeah.
And the guy goes, "Oh, you're driving south? Well, you're going to die in Mexico." And this is like a middle-aged, very intelligent person who's just staring at us completely, saying, "You're going to die in Mexico." I said, "Oh, well, we're already in." At that point, we were in Ecuador.
I think Argentina.
We were coming up from Argentina.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, we've flown up from Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, no. We spent, my whole life I've been going to Mexico, but this trip we spent 7-8 months in Mexico. It was fine. Well, no, you're going to die in Mexico. And I kind of chuckled, and he was really upset. And it was like, I don't know what to say. And so I kind of looked at my brother, and he just kind of shrugs his shoulders, going, "What do you say to that?" And I said, "I don't know." And then as we would hit countries, we'd say, let's say, we hit Ecuador, and they say, "Well, where'd you come from?" They assume you flew in, or you bought the truck there. And I said, "No, this is, we drove from Arizona." And, "Oh, you came through Colombia and they didn't rob you?" And you say, no, they were really nice. The food was good. The people were nice. It was wonderful. And they go, oh, you're just lucky. You're so lucky. Well, where are you going? You're not going south, are you? Well, yeah, we're heading to the next country. Oh, don't go to the next country. They're. So I think there's that fear of over the next hill. It's a natural human instinct.
Fear.
But unless there's like a State Department report that says, there's rioting in this next town, even then we'll kind of talk to some other travelers and they'll say, oh yeah, we just came from that town. Don't drive through a roadblock, pull up and say hello and introduce yourself. And, they're protesting because something, their land was taken from them or something, and ask if you can go through. And sometimes they say no, but the roadblock will be done Wednesday at noon. That's when we're all scheduled to be done, and come back then. Or sometimes they say, no, you're a tourist. Please enjoy the country and, be careful driving and stuff like that. And so for us, it's really hard. We don't take anyone's opinions too heavily, I guess, just because we've noticed the on-the-ground reality is so different. And so we always are reading the news. We are always talking to other travelers, but it's really tough when someone says, man, that next village or that next country or that next city, be careful because they're really bad. And you definitely get a little anxiety about it. And then we just keep asking people, so we get more than one opinion. And if you find someone coming from that town, they go, why? What? They said, what? No, why would you be worried? It's wonderful. In fact, they're having a festival today. Here, I'm going to take you with me and we'll go to my family's house. And it always has been just fine.
I guess we'll see what happens. Lisa's still giving me that look right now.
Well, and I think Colombia is probably the more tame, I'd say. In Central America, there was a lot more turmoil at the time when we were going, and so it was like, is it okay? And there was all kinds of stories even from other travelers. And at the time, Nicaragua had just sort of finished having a bit of a meltdown and was sort of stable again. And we entered 2 weeks after all their rioting had finished. And it was like, if you hadn't read about it, you wouldn't know that it had ever happened. There were zero signs that anything had ever happened. So good to be aware that it happened, but to us, there was no visual representation that anything had happened, and everyone seemed happy and nice. But I think once we hit south, the borders got easier to cross.
Yeah.
The paperwork was less. You'd go to a border crossing, and instead of them asking for a copy of the stamp they just made in your passport, and you have to go find a copy place, they had a copier right there and a printer, and they just, and there was no fees, and they welcomed you. So I think the South American ones are actually a lot easier and a lot more developed, I think.
Yeah, and I think usually the bigger cities are kind of where, the most turmoil, if turmoil is happening, is the hot spot kind of. So when we were in like Chile, they were having a huge meltdown.
Oh, yeah.
And, you could see stuff that had happened in littler towns at night. It wasn't probably the best to be out late and all that kind of stuff because there was issues, but just going in through, smaller cities, it wasn't a big deal. For us as travelers, but it could be more dangerous going into the big city.
The center of a big city. Yeah. What we noticed was it wasn't ever directed towards us or other people. It was, I'm going to break all the windows in the main government building because we're mad at them, or I'm going to break the windows on this bank because they're foreclosing on our farms or something. And so it was always directed at an entity. We never saw violence towards other people or experienced it. So.
That's good. So at what point did you guys ship Goose back?
It was pretty much, the world was sort of, stalling out, so COVID was a thing we'd not heard about. People were telling us to bring home toilet paper. We're going, what are you talking about? Because in Buenos Aires, Uruguay and Uruguay and Buenos Aires, they have little tiny stores on these streets in the big city. And there'll be, 2 rolls of toilet paper on the shelf. And, it was still there. So I was like, what do you mean the U.S. is out of paper towels and toilet paper? Like, this little store at the bottom of our building has 2 rolls and no one's buying them even. So I don't understand. Like, when one buys one, the guy will go back and put one more on the shelf, So there was just not that fervor and that panic happening where we were. But then we noticed flights were getting canceled. So we considered going up into Brazil. And because we loved Brazil, the food, the people, everything. And as we noticed things shutting down, and we had some friends we had met who were actually from South Korea, but they had driven south from Canada, and we stumbled into another traveler and met them. They were shipping, And so we kind of went, it's definitely the best idea to stick with them because there's already a container. They've already, scheduled it. Let's throw Goose in it and head home. And then we were going to still stay while the truck was at sea. We thought we'd hang out in Buenos Aires because it's amazing. And all of a sudden, flights were being canceled. And it was basically because before we go to any of these countries, we do sign up for the State Department emails. Whether or not they're always helpful or not is not so much an issue to us. It's just nice
Gives you
to
an
know,
idea,
yeah, what's going on. I mean, you'll get a general alert on every single country you've signed up for, including Canada. And I've watched the other, our friends who are Canadian or Australian, I've watched their alerts about the U.S., and they all kind of say the same thing. It's like once a month they send out an email, crime is high in these countries and theft could be an issue. We don't recommend you travel there. And that's about the U.S., about Canada. So you'll get those. But then when it's specific, and we got one from the State Department saying all Americans in, Argentina, we got one for every country, head home immediately. You have like 24 hours to fly home. And it was like, wow, okay. So we canceled the Airbnb we were staying in, and we got on a plane and headed home. And, we transferred through
we weren't sure if we were going to make
think.
it. I think we were in Sao Paulo, the airport there, and they wouldn't let you go to your connecting flight. They kind of separated you off and made you wait. And we were like, oh, this is where they're going to tell us, we're stuck here. We can't get on the next flight. And they were just, I don't know, they needed to walk the 5 people that were trying to get home to the next flight for security or safety or whatever. But it was kind of waiting and wondering if we're going to make it. And then once we did make it, we flew into Florida, which was the worst hotspot at that time. And looking at the news and being like, oh no, is it going to be 10 hours to get into the country through the airport? And it was fine. We walked right through, no questions.
That was funny. Yeah, after all this expectation and everyone telling us you'll probably be in quarantine, you probably won't get to Arizona for weeks or days, and then we walked in and they just waved, welcome home. All right. And then we took our transferring flight to Los Angeles, and when we were waiting for the truck to be shipped still, it was off at sea, we stayed with some family in San Clemente, California, and they were actually gone, so we thankfully had it to ourselves. And we both think from the traveling, from the airports, all that, the taxis, we even took a ferry ride, all these different things to get home. We're pretty sure we caught COVID, and we got horribly sick for 2 weeks. But they said, don't come to the hospital or the testing facility unless you need medical attention. We're swamped. So we just sat at home, and both of us were sicker than we've ever been, but we never did find out if we got it, because it was just one of those things that at the time, they said isolate if you think you have it, and if you need medical attention, sure, show up at a hospital, but otherwise be still. So we just took care of each other and sat still for a couple weeks.
Yeah, you come home and you get sick. How sucky
Yeah.
is that?
Exactly.
What was your deciding factor in selling Goose and buying Dusty?
I think for us, it was when we decided we wanted to continue. I think Goose was the perfect travel truck for a year on the road. Or if we continued, let's say we traveled for 2 or 3 months and then we flew home, and then we traveled for, and Goose stayed wherever he was in the world. He was sort of perfect for that, to truly live in him full time. It was just so tight. You could never, and I think the other factor was also doing the videos. We're working full-time hours trying to produce the videos. And so you could never even sit up straight, in the back there, due to the arc of an 80 series, the way the side, kind of the body comes in. Even with us cutting the roof off of them, you were always kind of leaning forward. It was just tough to actually live in. To travel in was great. You were camping, no worries. But we didn't have a downstairs bed. So those winds in Patagonia that are notorious and, literally can blow motorcyclists clean off the road. And in fact, a guy passed away, an American passed away riding a motorcycle down there when we were there.
Yeah.
So those winds were so gnarly. And we're trying to camp in the pop top because we didn't have a downstairs bed. So a lot of little things where you go, man, he's great for Baja and the western U.S. where the weather is pretty good. I mean, it's pretty nice, relatively speaking. And then to deal with the more extreme weather at the high and low latitudes, it just wasn't great for that. And so for us, it was like, look, if we're going to do this, let's have a little pod that, no matter what the weather is, no matter if we're in the middle of a city or in the middle of nowhere, we're going to be comfortable camping.
Yeah.
Can you give us the basic overview on Dusty?
Yeah, he's 1990. So, what you always want to do is go older, right? So, Goose is a 95. So we went, so Dusty is a 1990 80 series, an HDJ 80. So a diesel, German spec delivery, manual transmission, left-hand drive. So it's nice. I wouldn't have minded the right hand because, when you're going through all these countries, you'll see a bit of both. But it is nice to have the standard left-hand drive while we're home, at least. The manual transmission is a lot of fun, and we've been just loving having that because Tonto, the old FJ40, is manual, and we just enjoy that sort of being engaged since what we're doing most of the time is driving.
Yeah.
It's a straight six diesel, so we almost doubled the miles per gallon that we were getting with Goose. So Goose was like somewhere in the 13 mile per gallon, which is pretty normal for those old gasoline 80 series. And of course, Goose was heavy once we were in travel mode. So the new truck is better mileage. We get 18 to 24 miles per gallon. He's lighter, which is crazy that he's so much bigger in terms of the space, that big box on the back. But the box being carbon composite and carbon fiber ends up being lighter than the body of an 80 series, which is, glass and steel. So
Dusty is an 80 series that has been built by Maltech is the company that did it, but they put a box on the back so it makes it into a little living space in the back, and the roof pops up so you can have a bed upstairs, we call it.
Yeah,
upstairs and downstairs.
We're fancy now that we have a mansion. We have an upstairs and a downstairs. So when the weather's nice, the upstairs bed's bigger, plus it's just nice to have all that view and the airflow. But that bed is on gas struts, so you can push on it. It goes up against the ceiling, and now you've still got room to stand, but you can make the little downstairs bed, which is made from the bench seat. And even that bed's bigger than the one in Goose. So either way, we're very happy because we've gotten a bigger bed, whether it's the backup or the main one. And so he's got a diesel cooktop inside, and let's see, we've got, hot and cold water, which is kind of nice. So you can take a shower at the back of the truck if you need to. He's got a diesel heater. Mm-hmm. So at this point now, everything in the new truck runs off electricity, and we've got quite a bit of solar, or diesel. So we've kind of simplified the fuels that we use, just so we're not hunting around for things. We didn't have much trouble finding propane in the Americas. Thankfully, our fitting, the USA Euro style fitting worked. But I think as we go to other places in the world, that may not be the case. And so we're glad to just have sort of diesel to worry about, and then the sun is sort of the other source.
Yes, and I was floored with the gas mileage you're getting. I think somewhere on your Alaska trip you had mentioned that, and I was like, are you serious?
It is crazy. I mean, we don't drive fast, so in the new truck, it depends where we're at. In sort of developing countries and more off-road, I'm sure we'll drive even slower, and there'll be times where we might even get better mileage. But, going up into Alaska, you've got pretty decent paved roads, and we're cruising along at like 60 miles an hour, 65 or whatever if it's a highway. But if it's a two-lane sort of back road, probably 60 or something like that. And then the highest speed that the new truck can cruise is probably 70 to 75, and that feels like you're starting to wind the motor out. It's just not geared for high speed, being old school, pretty simplistic diesel. But we did keep the tire size a little bit smaller on the new truck, and I'm sure that helps a little bit. Yeah. But just the overall weights being so much lower, and then it being a diesel, seem to be the main contributing factors, because it's certainly not aerodynamic. It's it's an 80 series to start with. Sort of the shape of a cow, and then the back of it is just a giant box. And so, neither are conducive to high-speed aerodynamics, but we don't go high speed. So there you go.
It must be why we don't see cows in the Olympics.
This is the reason. I knew there was a reason.
That's awesome. I think, was it September, or when was it that you guys shipped from probably Bellingham to Alaska?
Yeah, I think it was September, right? Or
it was late August, I think, and then we were just getting into Alaska, I think, like the beginning of September, yeah. Okay,
yeah. And then that was great, though. It was we were kind of waiting for word that we'd be able to drive back through Canada. The ferry is, to us, was one of the highlights of the trip, and we're really glad we did it, but it's pretty immensely expensive, and so if we were going to ship up, we wanted to make sure we'd be able to drive back. And so we waited to kind of get word that Canada was open as long as you fulfilled whatever requirements. And we're kind of used to that, doing all these border crossings. So we said, cool, it's open. and then we headed up. And we were also trying to finish up a whole lot of work as well that we had going on in sort of the Pacific Northwest.
So I'm guessing at that point you probably had Dusty pretty dialed in. What things have become your favorite about Dusty?
I think for me, kind of trying to plan routes and feeling free to explore like I like to. Every time we see a dirt road, I want to see where it goes. And so I want to, especially if it's not a mapped area where you can't really see on the topos or whatever else, whether it goes somewhere, whether it dead ends. I like being able to check all those out. And we kill a lot of time while we're traveling, just trying dirt roads, seeing where they go. And sometimes we find our favorite campsite, and a lot of times you see dead ends, So with the range of Dusty, you can do all that. And that's one of my favorite things. It's so excessive. Now, there's certain parts of the world where it might actually be completely necessary, but for the most part, the range is just ludicrous. And so having 65 gallons of diesel with that sort of fuel mileage, you can go wherever you want to go. You can skip an entire state or an entire country if their fuel's expensive. So it's kind of a crazy thing, but I thoroughly am enjoying it. We just have to remember not to carry, another 500 pounds of diesel unless we actually need it. But for Alaska, it was so nice just to be able to go wherever we wanted, skip buying fuel. We left Fairbanks to go up to Prudhoe Bay, and we were able to head all the way up to Prudhoe Bay, do some side trips, go out to Manly Hot Springs Road and do a bunch of exploring and get back to Fairbanks and hit up the inexpensive Costco fuel.
Yeah.
Smart.
Anything you guys miss about Goose?
Yeah, I mean, we both just love Goose, and there's so many good memories, so it's hard to narrow them down, I think. But I loved cooking outside, and I love cooking inside too. But there was something that it felt more like camping, I think, a lot of times in Goose. And so I do miss some of those meals where it was just you're outside, everyone's hanging out, and you're able to just be part of it while you're cooking. So I miss that about him. You're kind of forced to be outside, which is in a way nice. But I think most of my memories for Goose are kind of the experiences that we had with him, the people that we got to hang out with, the places that we were. And it's more about that, I think, in my memory when I really think about it than the actual vehicle.
Yeah, and I think for me it's similar, but it's just the amount of time. I had Goose for so long, and then, our first date was in Goose, and our first trip was to Baja together in Goose. And so it was kind of he's been around the whole time that we've known each other. So it's easy to project a lot of feelings on a vehicle, and hence why we name everything. But it definitely was a part of the team. And so that's the hardest part, I think, is going, man, it'd be nice. That's why I think people pour endless money into modifying a vehicle. Even if it's not the right one, you're like, well, let's put a diesel in Goose and let's chop the back off and let's build a box on them. And we could have gone down that path with him just because you don't want to let go. I know it was the better choice to start with the right vehicle and go with it, but it was hard to let an old friend go.
Endless money, we would just have kept all the vehicles that we've ever owned.
Yeah, we've talked about this. If we had endless money, we'd have a hangar somewhere, and it would just be filled with everything we've ever owned, and we'd never get rid of any.
And of course, it would probably be one of those big wooden hangars that you found on, I think it was the Oregon Coast.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's perfect.
We looked at that. We thought this is a reasonable size. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Kelsey, I'm super curious because we're right in between choosing what we're going to be traveling in. I really struggle with how much indoor space do we need especially in Alaska with all the mosquitoes and bugs, and you guys forewent that. So that was pretty smart. But from doing your editing on videos to cooking, how much do you think you enjoy the new vehicle being inside if it's either crappy weather or there's lots of bugs, or how much do you find that you're still doing things outside?
I think it's a little bit tainted because of the amount of work that we're doing. So I think that would kind of skew probably a little bit how I looked at it. For me, the new truck is amazing to be able to sit in there and edit. But I think in Goose, the biggest thing that I would have wanted to change is not necessarily the amount of space, but the way we use the space. So for me, being able to have a bed or some sort of place that you could be downstairs was key, because then it can be quiet and you can work to me, it's not a big deal to kind of lay in bed essentially and just have like a laptop on your lap to work and that sort of thing. It is nice to have an indoor space, and it's really luxurious to have the amount of space that we do in the truck now. But I would never say that you need it for sure. It's a luxury.
Well, I think in Goose, for that, what would have made it a lot better for Kelsey, for us both, but is to have even just 2 seats inside where you were very comfortable and you could work on your laptops, and the amount of space wouldn't be as important as both of us having a station, so to speak, to sit comfortably. And we didn't really dial that in because we were just kind of working within the confines of an 80 series and going, well, this is fine. And, when you've camped for weeks at a time in Baja, you think you have an idea of what full-time is going to be. But really, until you've done full-time remote and not going to campsites and you've spent a month, let's say, out, or a few months, everything kind of becomes different, I think, for us. And so there were so many things we couldn't have planned for that now it's just nice that, I'd say the interior space to us still seems excessive, even though it's a very small space. When people see it, they go, "You live in that?" They go, "Oh, you should have seen the other truck," So it's all relative. But really, when you're at camp, you want to have enough space to sit comfortably. And for us, we might download movies and put them on our laptop or something like that. And otherwise, you kind of want to either be driving and exploring or out of the truck, hiking, sitting in a chair, hanging out with other travelers or whatever. So the interior space for us, I think it's nice to have something comfy, but we don't need a lot of it.
Yeah, because I would say most, in Goose, 90% of the time, we really enjoyed being outside and not needing that much interior space. We would do a bug net on the back when we, we were in a place that had really bad bugs or something. So you make do. And, cooking, I'd say 90% of the time it was fine outside. Occasionally, like when we were down in Patagonia, the winds are so crazy that you're like, there's no way that I'm going to get the stove out and stand outside and try to cook something. So we had like a little jet boil and, you make soups or something, and it was fine. It wasn't a big deal. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think you need as much space as we do have, but it sure is nice.
Yeah.
We're in the big cow now. We've got elbow room.
Oh, jeez.
So in Dusty, how much water can you carry?
About 20 gallons, and then we have water bags that we liked to use in Goose because we didn't have much water storage in him, so we carried sort of these Swiss water bags, just rubber, heavy duty rubber, so you're not accidentally going to pierce them. And you can carry 5 gallons in each of those. But then when you're not using them, you just roll them up and tuck them away, and they take up almost no space. So in this truck, we're at about 20 because we have like 16 gallons, I think, in the main tank and another 3 gallons in the hot water system that sits within the hot water tanks and system. So it ends up just under 20, and then we can fill a couple of these 5-gallon water bags if we were concerned.
And your normal routine for getting water and filtering it if needed?
It's different in this truck. In Goose, we had the Lifesaver jerry can, so we could kind of pump from whatever source we wanted. In this truck, like in Alaska, we mostly found hoses, at a gas station or that sort of thing. And then we also have another Lifesaver. It's a smaller version, kind of a hand version of the big jerry can that we used to have, so that we can get water from, a stream or whatever if necessary. But I think the idea with this truck is to find more hoses and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's tough. So like in Goose, that Lifesaver jerry can was sort of the source, right? We had life straws for an emergency backup, like a little backpacking filter, if the jerry can failed us. But essentially, we knew all water had to go through the Lifesaver jerry can, and pretty much all water we drank on the entire trip, what came through that. We in the middle of the Amazon jungle, you just walk over the stream, fill up your jug, and it was slow, so we would have a whole day where we just quote made water, and we'd fill all the other containers up from that Lifesaver jerry can. And that was sort of our main go-to. Now, the filtration system we put into Dusty. So Dusty was a great like shell of a truck, and the box was really good, and the cabinetry was beautiful, but it wasn't set up to be probably a world travel truck. The guy who had Dusty built was looking for more like, a long week in Baja type setup. So the water filtration system was sort of under the assumption that you had pretty good water coming in, and you didn't even make it safe. So we've changed that to where now you can put, we want to get the sediment and the sand and anything like that, the chunks out of the water before it goes into the tank. But now the system we have within the truck is UV and half micron, so it can filter it to be safe to drink. So we've kind of changed from, needing to filter the water on its way into our tanks to now we can put almost anything into the tank and filter it as it's used. But we do want to try and keep as clean a water going in as we can, so we've got a few different ways to do that. Like Kelsey was mentioning, a smaller lifesaver filter, sort of like a backpacking system where you pump it, hand pump it, and you could draw it from any source and sort of pre-filter it. So we always like to have a couple ways to filter the water, but it kind of depends on the country. Like in Mexico, no one trusts the water. The locals don't really trust their water. So there's always garrafones or what do we call them?
Purificadas or something, yeah. You can get purified water.
Yeah, and so that's so common and it's so cheap. You can get, 5, 10, 15, 20 gallons of purified water from one of these little sources very cheaply. And everyone's getting it. So it becomes very common and easy to just buy bulk filtered water. Whereas in some of the other countries, the locals were good with drinking the water, but some other travelers had said they've gotten sick. Their stomachs just weren't up for it. So they didn't have lots of water for sale cheaply. You'd have to buy a bunch of 1-gallon containers. So it was nice to have the ability always to filter your own, just in case bulk sort of cheap filtered water wasn't available.
So amongst our travels that we're doing, of course, I'm going to be the main person in the kitchen, which I enjoy. What size of fridge, freezer, and shopping routine do you do?
I think the fridge is a 45 liter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a huge fridge or anything. Like if we buy, a bunch of beers or something, it's usually, put as many as you can fit in there with all the rest of the groceries, and then when you take one out, put one in. One
in, one out. Strict rules.
Yeah. If you forget, you're in trouble. But as far as the shopping routine, I mean, it depends on how remote you are and what's available. And in some of the more remote places, it was like, what kind of veggies do they have and how fresh are they, and I'll take whatever I can get, kind of a thing, and work with that. We will carry rice, some dried goods, so that in case you can't find a bunch of fresh food, you do have something to eat. Ramen, even canned soup, stuff like that you can find. We'll take that with us. But I try to keep shopping. I don't buy a lot of chicken just because it's so dirty, so I don't tend to cook too much chicken or that sort of stuff when we're in the truck.
It's just hard to store.
It's hard to store.
And then you
it's
start
hard to
worrying
clean
about
everything.
it, and like, okay, should we be worried about this? And then it's in the fridge. It could contaminate the other vegetables.
Yeah, so I'll look at vegetables and see, which ones maybe last longer, get some of those, which ones that we really want but might not last as long, and we'll use those first. So kind of being mindful of what lasts longer and that sort of thing. And then for meats, it also depends on how often we're going to be restocking. If it's going to be, we're going 2 weeks without going to a grocery store, I'll buy, maybe some ground beef, and we'll use that first.
Yeah.
But I'll also get maybe bacon, and I know that lasts quite a bit longer, and, like sausage will last quite a bit longer, and just think about that stuff, because we don't have a freezer, so I'm not freezing anything.
Yeah. We did for protein, we did a lot of eggs. I mean, that was one of our primary things we were eating during the trip, because they're everywhere and they're almost free. They're so cheap.
And in most other countries, you don't have to refrigerate them, which is nice, so it doesn't take up fridge space.
Yeah. So we'd have one of those little plastic cheapo, you can find them at any camping store, egg holders, and we just fill that up and have those, at a safe spot, not in the fridge. And that was a really good source of protein, because sometimes, these mountain markets, you see all the meat is just open air hanging, and I know it's fine. All the locals are having it, but you start to feel like maybe you don't feel like meat as often.
Not so interested in it.
So we ate plenty of it.
Reasonable.
But you realize, they're buying it today to eat tonight, and so we're buying it today to eat throughout this coming week. And so it's really hard for us to do that because we don't have a freezer. And so I think for us, we always looked at meat like, hey, let's buy this and have it tonight or tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we looked at meat as, is within a couple of days of the market is when we're having the meat. And then after that, we're having tons of vegetables, pastas, rice, eggs, all that other stuff was what kept us going for weeks beyond that.
Yeah, I'd say onions and peppers were kind of a staple vegetable that you could pretty much find anywhere.
Yeah.
And lasted fairly well. So it'd be like onions, garlic, those, and peppers, and then whatever extra veggies that you could find were kind of our go-to.
Yep. And then every town has a market, which was so cool because if you hit it on a Sunday, it's going to be massive, Saturday or Sunday sometimes. And, it's like everyone from the entire mountainside area around the village has come into town. They're all selling their vegetables. Everything's super fresh. And other times you hit a market on like a Monday or a Tuesday, and there's just whatever's left. And you kind of go in and go, all right, we're good. But there was always food. There was never even a slight concern on not having enough food or not having enough to eat. We definitely overate in most places.
And is it safe to assume that laundromats are still the way to go for taking care of laundry?
I mean, somewhat. I think we got to the point we chose our clothing for the trip based on being sort of quick dry and stuff like that. We still had a pair of jeans or whatever and normal stuff. And we just got to where we always did it ourselves. We felt like when we're in a city, it's so hard to find parking for the truck and deal with parking the truck somewhere and then sitting in a laundromat all day. And then, okay, the sun's going down, but we need to get out of town because we're campers unless we've got an Airbnb. So what we ended up doing is if we got an Airbnb that had washer and dryer, we would take advantage and do everything, the sheets, the pillowcases, everything. But if we were on the road and camping, we would just use these collapsible buckets and we do it ourselves. And so we got to the point where we really weren't using laundromats, and it was really just if a hotel or an Airbnb had a washing machine, we'd use it. Otherwise, we were just using a bucket and doing everything ourselves.
Got it. And then for cell and internet service, what's currently working for you guys?
We used a combination. So like Google Fi is nice because it just works everywhere. It's not the cheapest. And so but you only pay for what you use. So what we found is we'd be sitting in line at the border of Guatemala or somewhere. And as you are in you're crossing that no man's land, which is that space between the two countries that isn't really either of the countries. You've checked out of one country, but you've yet to check into the new one. Sometimes those gaps were 15 miles. And so in that area, you're going to lose the other country's service sometimes and not gain the new one yet. And so we usually found that with the Google Fi, as we sort of got in line at the next country, your phone just says, welcome to blah, 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 whatever the country is. And your phone works. And it works without trying, without thinking about it. And if you need a map, a background map to go, you know what, iOverlander's got a map of this border crossing. Let's take a look at it. But you're going to need some cell service to do that. So it's really nice. And then if we were going to stay in a country for a while, you go and get a local SIM card. So you just simply put in the local SIM card. You're using the much cheaper local data. But if we were going through, let's say in central, some of the countries, we were like, hey, our ship is leaving in a couple of weeks to head to Colombia. So we need to get going. We just didn't spend I think let's say Nicaragua, we spent a week and a half maybe there.
Yeah, maybe 2 weeks, but yeah.
But that was a short enough amount of time where we just said, look, we're not using the phones that much. Let's just go with Google Fi. Honduras, we were only in for a day because we were trying to make some miles. So if it was short, we never did anything and just let Google Fi be our service. Mm-hmm. And then if like in Argentina, we knew we'd spend months and months throughout, on and off again as we traveled, we went ahead and got local SIM cards just because it was so much cheaper. And why not do it?
And what did you use in Alaska?
Alaska, we were just using Google Fi. So it was super minimal. And up there, I think it's AT&T and Verizon, but maybe even more AT&T. That's one I would just look up. But basically, when we told locals we really had very little service with Google Fi, they said, oh, yeah, pretty much Fairbanks, Prudhoe Bay. They named like the 5 towns, Anchorage, that you would have service with Google Fi because it uses a combination of like T-Mobile, Sprint, and sometimes AT&T. And they kind of said, yeah, that just doesn't work that well up here. So we really didn't have good service up in Alaska. That was probably the worst I've ever seen the Google Fi work.
Yeah.
That's understandable. I mean, if you're going to a place like that has such a remote area, you kind of got to figure out what carrier has invested so heavily to put in the network and go with that one. But for us, it wasn't a huge deal. We didn't really miss it or need it. And our phones should still work on 911 on these other carriers' systems if we needed it. But it was a little bit frustrating, I think.
Yeah, that one, with the Google Fi, it just depends on in what country, what contract they have with which provider. So sometimes we would notice that, like, we were on the less good network, I guess, in whatever country, but it still worked for us enough of the time. And then if we were, like he said, if we're staying longer, we'll get something that works better maybe. But it's a really nice luxury when you travel with someone who doesn't have a phone that just automatically switches. It's a whole another step once you cross the border to be like, okay, now I'm in here. Now I have to figure out where can I get a SIM card? What do I have to do to get the SIM card? Where do I go? I can't find it because my phone's not working. And so it's just nice. It's a nice luxury.
We would end up helping the travelers we were traveling with and say, well, we'll use our phone and look up where the nearest cell places are. And then sometimes they'd say, no, you can't, as a foreigner, we can't give you a SIM card because you need to have a local address. Here, go to the corporate office in the next city. And, we can look all that up and navigate to the next city with our phones and then help them get the next SD card, or ourselves get the next SD card, SIM card, sorry, not SD card.
And then with the Google Fi, we can just use our phones as a hotspot for Wi-Fi if we need to do that. And then otherwise we'll just look for, a coffee shop or a brewery or somewhere that has Wi-Fi and hang out there and steal their Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we found that Wi-Fi was more pervasive in Central and South America than it is in North America. I mean, everywhere had Wi-Fi.
Most gas stations have Wi-Fi.
Just while you're sitting at a gas station, you'll find Wi-Fi. It's not always super fast, but like up in Alaska, we went into a brewery and they said, oh, it's illegal for us to have Wi-Fi because it's considered entertainment and our liquor license doesn't include entertainment. And it was interesting that in, the United States, it was actually tougher sometimes to find Wi-Fi than it was in these countries to the south. So I don't think that would be a concern. Fast Wi-Fi, that's tough to find. But just to find Wi-Fi, check email, look at a map, something like that, that's pretty pervasive.
Well, I do like, if you're going to try and find Wi-Fi, Kelsey, that your first two choices are a coffee shop or a brewery.
That's the go-to.
That's the go-to.
Awesome.
What time of day is it? And let's go to one of these two places.
If more bakeries have Wi-Fi, that would be my, probably first choice.
There you go.
Bakery, coffee shop.
Yeah, bakeries, listen up. Get some Wi-Fi rolling.
What's going on?
Exactly. So in regards to working either on the road or in between trips like you guys do, Tim, I think you're still doing off-road training with the military. You did some mapping work in the Pacific Northwest last summer, which sounds super cool. What's your advice to people that are looking for something to do either while they travel or in between trips?
I think the in-between is tough because it has to be flexible. It has to be able to be turned on when you want it to be turned on, right? When you get home, that's when you need the work to be there and to pay you. And so for us, a lot of the stuff we've done over these last few years to keep going has just been whatever is available by default, And so when we get home, we say, hey, there's a ton of mapping work. Let's go do it. Or there's some training runs with the military. Or, hey, these are training things with Overland Expo. And so we would just jump to whatever was available. While traveling, I think for us was much tougher because neither of us can code. Neither of us have had remote jobs. We always had go into the office type jobs. And so we started doing the videos kind of to show our family and just to remember this 1 year trip. And then as we did more and more of it and worked harder and harder and longer hours at it, we went, if we work hard at this, maybe this can become the work. And so we've just kept pushing at that. And, it's been growing and growing. And so for us, it's kind of making up your own job too, because stopping and working is definitely one way to go. And most of the other travelers we've met, who've done big trips have come home, they've rented an apartment or moved in with some family, gotten a traditional job and gone back to work. We just kind of knew that as soon as you take on rent or a mortgage again, it's really hard to leave and it's really hard to save. So that's why we've always chosen jobs to stay in the truck, which is probably less convenient to come home and not have a place to sort of settle back into and relax. But it saved us a ton of money by staying mobile and in the truck. And even by earning relatively little at some of these side jobs. Some of them pay up pretty good. Some of them don't pay so well. But we've been able to take pretty much 100% of what we're making to save towards the next adventure. And then only a minimal amount towards, sort of life costs.
Then in regards to your decision to like sell all your stuff and do that Pan Am trip, what did you guys really take away from that experience?
I think, one, how hard making the decision and actually leaving is. That is probably the hardest part of the whole trip.
Yeah, breaking free.
Yeah, I mean, because there was a good financial book I read. I'd always read things like that, how to save, how to try and invest, all these sorts of things. And one comment or one quote that stayed with me was something to do with just the way the human brain works. However much money your target amount is you want to save, you'll never quite get there. It'll always be about double what you have, or 2.5 times what you have saved up. So you're like, okay, I've got 20 grand saved up for the trip. I think if I had 45 or 50, I'd leave today. If only I had that much, I'd leave today. And then as you save towards that higher amount, your brain is always readjusting. And so if you get the 50,000 you wanted to do your round the world trip, you're going, that's not enough. That is definitely not enough. There's so many things. There's so many what ifs. God, if only I had 120 or something, I would absolutely leave tomorrow, but I don't. So I'll keep saving. So it's like that squirrel gathering nuts. Regardless of how many it needs, it just continues. And so for us, I think that was the hardest part, is actually setting a date, actually doing it, despite all these alerts in your head saying, don't leave, don't leave comfort, don't leave a paycheck, stay home, stay safe, and keep saving. And that was the hardest thing to break free from, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how much you feel like you need stuff too. And we, when we first left, we sold a lot of stuff, but we also kept a storage unit of kind of the stuff that we thought we really wanted to keep. And then after traveling for a while and deciding, our priorities had shifted and we do want to be on the road, that you look at all this stuff and you go, why did I think this was important? Why did I even save this? Like, why did I waste space packing this up? And it's interesting just to see the difference once you live kind of without all the stuff, how much it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think every time we've come home, we've gotten rid of more stuff. We look at the storage unit, and every time it's almost like we again look at it and go, geez, why the last time did we not get rid of that? We still thought we should hold on to that. So it's a progressive thing, I think, that more and more you start to be able to let go of it, but it doesn't happen all at once.
I can imagine that perspective changes quite a bit once you've been on the road and you haven't had that stuff for quite a long time. You look back at it and exactly what you just said. So we're in our last few months before we leave and not having a house or anything to come back to, which is a little unnerving, but exciting at the same time. What lessons did you pull away from that experience for you? What advice would either you have for us or for other people that are in that same position?
I think that you're at the hardest stage, like Tim was saying, of letting go of kind of that routine, that comfort, and it'll be hard. It's tough to let go of that routine and kind of learn to be okay with, like, I'm sleeping somewhere different every night, and it's a weird feeling to go on the road, but I think for us at least, it's so worth it, and it gets easier and you'll see those priorities change and yourself grow. And I think all of that is so exciting. I'm so excited for you guys.
Yeah, it is awesome. And it is scary. And I think that's just inherent. And that part really doesn't go away. You just become
the fear of the
comfortable
unknown,
with the fear. We still, every time we cross a border, have anxiety, and it's like we'll turn to each other and go, hey, this is a particular border we've done 20 times, but isn't it funny how, like, we both get anxious, there's all this official stuff we have to do, and, like, we're in this controlled area. It's scary, isn't it? And we kind of laugh, but it's always still there, and I think you just become more comfortable with that feeling, but it doesn't necessarily go away.
So a classic question for us, and one we always learn a lot from: what's been a significant challenge you've had to overcome in the last couple of years, and what did you take away from that?
I think, like we were talking about, just being comfortable with that fear, the unknown. For me, I like to be in control a lot, and just letting go and being okay with not totally being in control, and the fact that, you're you'll always be a little uncomfortable, and I actually want to be a little uncomfortable, I've realized in life, and push yourself to those limits. And so I think for me that's probably the biggest thing I've had to kind of learn, and I'm still learning and dealing with, just being okay with that and growing that way.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things I try and do, like for the team, is worry about the budget and, how do we perpetuate? How do we continue this? How long do we need to stop for? So for me, I've always worried about how do we continue and are we going to be okay financially? And so for me, just having faith that if we will find work to do, or we will grow the channel, we will, having just that faith that it's going to be okay, for me is one of the toughest things to let go of. And once you're really traveling, you don't think about it so much. But I think in the times where we've paused, and people will always say, just like that person maybe raised their eyebrow when you said where you were going, people will always throw caution. They'll throw their fears at you, and being more adept at not taking on someone else's fears, or looking at it and going, is that a valid one? Should I be worried about that? No, I don't think so. And letting it go. That's been a tough one for me too. I think inherently, I want to worry about everything and then check them off as I have sort of secured them and go, okay, that's not a worry, that's okay. And sometimes you just have to let it go. And for me, not letting others' worries get to me has definitely been a challenge. And the more we travel, the less that's an issue. And the more you become confident in yourself, and the more you relate to other travelers because they think like you do. And the more you travel, the more you'll kind of go, I'm not worried about that. I have 5 friends in that country. I can't wait to go visit them. So, you might be worried to go, but I'm excited and I think it's going to be fine.
What are a couple places or experiences that first came to mind as absolute favorites?
Baja always sticks out as a favorite.
We hear that
just
so
such
much. It's awesome.
Yeah, I know. It is really special, and I think it might not be the way it is for a lot longer, as the world grows and people are, exploring more. But for me, that's a really special place. I think anywhere that's near the ocean is a fun place for me. I love all the beaches.
Well, I think that particular trip to Baja, we had done so many before it and so much racing over the years there, but that was the first time we're not heading home. And it hit us that, this is real, When we were in the mountains near San Diego camping, it was just, I don't know, we'd quit our jobs. It just hadn't sunk in yet. And then when we hit Baja and we're up in the mountains, up in the pine trees, then we're down at the beach, and we just went, well, this is it. This is now our life for at least a while. I think that made that particular, session through Baja extra good. For me, I think one of my favorite areas was all of Argentina. As soon as we got there, it was such a big country. It's so diverse, like the U.S., that we were up in massive elevation, up in mountains, and super remote. You hadn't seen people in days, seeing old mines, just like I love to do in the western U.S. Then you could be down at the beach. You could visit wine region. You could go to a massive city and get an Airbnb and be a city person for a while. You could go to so many different climates and see so many different cultures.
Yeah.
In Argentina, it was wild. You'd see a particular area and the people looked completely different than the Argentinians in a different area. And you just realized how big the country is and how many different cultures are within it. So for me, that was kind of neat. We even went to Cardones National Park, and the Cardone is, kind of a very close cousin to the Saguaro. So we're camping amongst Saguaro and Red Rock, and it felt like home. But you're so far from home. You're just about as far as you can get, from home within the Americas anyways. And it was so cool to feel that feeling of being home, talking to the locals and telling them how much this reminds you of home and showing them photos of Arizona and being so far from home. So it was a neat feeling that you can feel like home anywhere. So that was a cool one for us.
Yeah.
And then I think for me, I really did love Bolivia's extremes, the salt flats where you could put your car in cruise control and just sit there with your hands off the wheel, staring out the front windshield for 2 hours. And then you're just crossing a dead flat salt flat and, navigating like a boat would towards an island. and picking whatever path you want to get there and just kind of pointing at things and going, I wonder what that little speck is. It says, it's 60 miles. Let's just point the truck at it, drive 60 miles an hour, and we'll be there in an hour. That was a really neat thing. And then driving up to 19,000 feet in elevation where you're barely able to breathe yourself, wondering if the truck's going to die. And, those extremes were a neat novelty in my time, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you guys are getting a lot of messages from people like us who you continue to inspire. It's probably a little weird, but you've been a big inspiration in keeping our dreams alive. So thank you for sharing your travels and experiences with all of us.
That's always awesome to hear, because before we left, we were kind of watching, certain YouTube videos, and it keeps you inspired, and remembering that there are those people out there that think like you and you can do it, they can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
So it's cool to know that we can inspire other people that way.
Yeah, I think it motivates us too, back the other direction.
Yeah.
I think to share more and to capture as much of the trip and the adventures as you can to share when you realize that it has an impact.
So what keeps you guys motivated to continue overlanding and traveling the way that you do?
I think for us, for me anyways, it's like life is so short. This earth is so big. And if you started traveling when you were 10 years old, there's not enough time, right, to see it all. And so you might as well get after it and see as much as you can. And there's so many different ways to travel, motorcycles, cars, boats, sailing, flying, there's so many different ways to travel, and there's such a big planet to see that for me, that's kind of what keeps us going, is to think it's not that we've been on the road a long time. We've barely been on the road at all. And we've seen a lot, but there's so much more to see.
So financing and budgets are always a top curiosity for people. What have you either determined, or what advice do you give people on a monthly budget, whether that be as one big number, or if you can split that up, like for fuel? Obviously it's going to be different for everybody, but something kind of rough, and maybe, I don't know, maintenance, food, entertainment.
Yeah, don't forget the fun.
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. We're going to try and do a video on it, because we've met people, our normal sort of burn rate, if we were being very cost conscious, not driving too much, was like $800 a month, but we've spent well over $3,000 in a month because you had to ship, right? So you have these big spikes in cost that you really can't help. But also it depends on how you travel. We've met people, the whole Pan American, something like, and I'm probably misquoting a little bit here, but it's 15 to 18,000 miles from Alaska all the way to the tip of South America. So it's not that far. And some people literally drive the Pan Am. Their fuel cost is going to be minuscule compared to us doing over 100,000 miles of zigging and zagging and going all over the place. And so we've seen people who said their number one cost is food. And we went, wait a minute, what? How? Food was super cheap for us everywhere. Well, they loved going to the best restaurant in every city and in every country, award-winning restaurants. That was their passion. And so food for them became the number one cost by far, because that's what their entertainment was, is going out and having nice food and nice experiences in that way. We thought food was probably the lowest cost. It was minuscule, really, depending on how you ate. We cooked a lot of our own meals. We ate a lot of street food, but we didn't often sit in a restaurant and sit at a traditional table, unless it was sort of like a little diner or something. We didn't really do full dinners. And so for us, it was just a completely different thing. Fuel was not just double, I think it was quadruple our most expensive, or our highest expense. And so fuel for us, because we liked exploring so much, became by far the highest expense. So we've heard people say that if you take 25 grand, that's sort of a round generic number, but you can do the whole Pan American. Now, how you do it is up to you. You can do it over 2 years, and you're probably still going to be pretty close to the 25 grand, because moving slowly is actually pretty cheap, and taking your time to find cheap places to camp, cheap food, etc. Or you can drive really fast and get it all done, but all that rushing is going to incur a lot of expense, and you'll probably end up at about 25 grand. So that's a really generic, sort of round number, but we did find that over the first, year, we were probably at about 18,000 spent, And then the next year was less than that as we sort of slowed down a little bit and took our time. But it's so tough to give a number, I think. Like you said, everyone's vehicle is different. That the distance people travel, some people can go around the world and do 70,000 miles and do technically the whole planet, right? Or the main routes, I guess, throughout different continents. Or you can do 800,000 miles and cover the same basic countries and continents. So it's so different. It's really hard to put a number on. I think everyone sort of figures out how they travel. Within the first 2 months, I think, of traveling, you sort of dial in how you're going to travel. How often do you need convenience? Do you want a hotel or an Airbnb or a paid campground with a shower often? Or are you good with remote camping and then a treat of our sort of setup was we prefer remote, always free if we can find it. We would spend hours a day hunting for remote sites. But then when we got to a big city, the only way we felt comfortable enjoying it is knowing that Goose was parked somewhere safe and that we had a place to come back to, so like an Airbnb of some sort. And that was how we would do a city. So we'd do 3 or 4 nights in an Airbnb, walk every day and explore the city, and get back in the truck and leave. And so we kind of found our flow, I guess, our rhythm. And I think that's what you have to find. And then you'll know, you can then look back at your expenses and go, okay, this is about what I think we're going to spend per month.
Any recommendations on personal and vehicle insurance?
It's really tough. So for vehicle insurance, you'll be able to find Mexico insurance, no problem. For everywhere else, there's pretty much, I don't want to say there's no insurance, but you're pretty much going to find insurance in that country. And different people have had different experiences with it paying out. Some countries, it's sort of a country fund. You're just paying into the country's insurance fund, and I've never heard of anyone getting a payout from it. And so it's really almost like a tax to basically make sure they're putting some money into their insurance fund. So if you do hit a local's car, maybe the government pays out to them or something. And so some of the countries, it's almost more of a tax, and I wouldn't even consider yourself having insurance. And then in Mexico, at least, you can get any number of U.S. or North American or European insurance companies to cover you. But it seems like from there on out, it's pretty much, I always get whatever we're required to get. We try to get the best insurance of the ones we're able to. In South America, I think there was some more international, actually recognized companies, and they were willing to cover you for a group of countries. So they'd say, okay, we'll do Chile, Argentina. What were the others in that particular group? I think it was maybe Bolivia and Peru, something like that. It was like a 4-country package. And I'm sorry if I'm misquoting the countries. I would definitely just look it up once you get to that part of the world. But they would cover several countries, and it seemed like legitimate insurance. You're choosing your deductibles, you're choosing your coverages. It seemed like it was good coverage. A lot of the countries, though, you're basically bare. And the same with health insurance, because we found that you can get a sort of tourist or adventure policy, but they assume you're traveling like a normal person, where you fly into a country, you fly out. So when we gave any insurance company the list of countries we were going to, and then the time frame, they said, well, no, this is for tourism, not for living in your truck going through all these countries. So we never did really find good insurance. We had a MedJet certificate or package, I guess you could call it, or policy, where we'd be flown back to the U.S. if we were severely injured or it was serious, and that was a policy we got. Over time, we found that really the worst thing we could do would be to fly back to the U.S. due to the cost of healthcare. So we had friends who had to go to the emergency room in Argentina, other friends who had some serious, injuries in Peru, and they basically found the best hospital within the country they were in, and it was very similar to U.S. care, and something like, 1/100th of the cost. Some friends of ours spent 2 weeks in Argentina in a nice hospital, all the meals included. They were both sleeping in the room. The husband was sleeping next to the emergency bed of his wife, and I think the total bill when they left was like $850, and it was a week or 2 they spent there. I can't remember, but staggeringly inexpensive and vast difference. And the coverage, they felt like, because they got to sort of a developed and nice city, was very similar to them, almost unmistakable to a U.S. hospital. Of course, I think there's places where you may not want to be getting the coverage, right? And so the ability to have money set aside to get somewhere that you think you'll get the coverage level you want, so maybe a bigger city within the same country, but the bigger city, And maybe certain cases you actually want to get back to the U.S. One of these MedJet or something similar might be worthwhile. We've gotten to the point where for the in-country coverage, we just set aside an amount of money that would get us where we want to be or would cover the circumstances we'd be under, because it's really tough. And maybe there is something out there we've never found that would cover you all around the world year after year. But most of them were like, okay, so here's a 90-day policy. And you're like, well, I need more than 90 days, And that was always our struggle.
And your best advice maintaining both personal safety and keeping vital gear and documents safe in your rig?
I think for personal safety, just, common sense. If one of us felt like it was a bad situation, we would let the other one know. And in general, you're driving through a city or something and maybe you get a weird vibe, and we'd just be like, okay, let's keep going. This is not a place we're going to stop. And then as far as documents, just making sure we had copies of everything, both digitally and paper. And that way, even like our wallets, I've made copies of all our credit cards so that we have, if we lose like a wallet or a wallet gets stolen, we have everything that was in that wallet so we can take care of that. And then, for a big part of our safety stuff is keeping hard drives and stuff safe, because it has all of our footage and that sort of stuff on it. So I always have a backup copy that's, stored somewhere else. So if the laptop were to get stolen, it not everything is lost.
Yeah, I think, and for the documents, copies are good. And then like we in South America actually lost, we think at an insurance agent's office, we lost our title to our truck, which means we were not able to leave the country. But, when your time comes, you have to leave. You're not allowed to stay. So we were in a bind where we couldn't leave because we didn't have our original title to show at the border, but we needed to leave within a month or something like that. And so we found that, sort of leaning on family back in your home country to say, hey, I need someone to get me a certified version of a title and mail it down here, but mailing isn't always that reliable. So if you can fly and meet somebody or fly home yourself, you kind of got to be ready to do those sorts of things, because a lot of times with mail, we found they would say, yeah, in 30 to 60 days it might show up. And so for us, for your driver's license, for your title of your vehicle, for your license plates, these are things that if you let your local DMV know that you've lost your license plate or your title or your driver's license, you can pay a small fee and get a new one. And then those old ones, if you're in a foreign country, might come in handy to be able to show to somebody to have an actual title. It may not in the U.S. computers be the current print version, but that is a real title, and it's really for your vehicle. That could be nice to show someone if you need to have a backup.
What's restored your faith in humanity, if anything, as you guys have traveled?
I think everything. I
mean,
mean,
people are just so friendly and nice and giving. If you put yourself out there, you'll be rewarded, I think.
Yeah, and I think that I definitely can have a side of me that maybe is somewhat of a cynic, and so the travel has been the ultimate cure for that, really. I knew that people were good, and I knew from Baja, especially over the years, how kind people are. But I think that's what's been driven home in so much travel is every time you meet somebody, you're blown away. Every time you're in the middle of nowhere or even in the middle of night and somebody walks up to your truck, your first instinct might be fear, and it definitely is logical to be a little fearful, especially in the middle of the night. But it's always turned out to be somebody concerned about us, wondering if we needed anything, letting us know that we can camp at their house, letting us know that tomorrow we should come by for coffee or to get some breakfast, or that the town is having an event next week if we can stay. And we've been to people's birthday parties that we don't know. We've so many of these things. And I think throughout the trip as we traveled, we opened up more and more to those experiences. Whereas at first you're a little standoffish to go, what? And we just always trust our gut. I rarely, if ever, have we had a bad gut feeling where we said, no, I think we should get out of here.
Yeah.
That's very rare.
If you could put any message on every billboard in America, what would it be?
Don't let the fear of what if hold you back from doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up with some fun facts about you, as we always do. What's your favorite genre of music, and who is the best singer between the two of you?
Oh, geez. That's almost impossible. We listen to so many different kinds. I'd say classic rock is probably like my go-to. And if I had to pick, gosh, I don't know. Like the Rolling Stones? I don't know.
Oh, who the best singer is?
Oh, best singer. Sorry, I went with band.
The best
You gotta
singer
pick
between the
singer.
two of you. Tim and Kelsey have a sing-off. Who's going to win?
Definitely. Tim's going to win.
That's awesome.
I don't know about that. I think she's being generous.
Well, that's nice. What's a favorite drink in the morning to get you going?
Coffee.
Coffee, black coffee.
Yeah.
You know, we've transitioned to an AeroPress from a French press, and we love it.
That's awesome. And a favorite beverage at night to wind down after a long day on the road?
I think whatever's local.
Yeah.
You know, in Central America, you find these amazing rums, these aged rums. And then, of course, in South America, it becomes a wine country, and it's all about the wine.
What's your advice to those planning an overland trip or lifestyle?
I think go for it.
Yeah.
You can do it. You can figure out the details. It doesn't matter what vehicle. Don't let all these things like building the perfect vehicle, saving the perfect amount of money stop you. We've met people with $250 to their name on a bicycle, and we've met people with millions of dollars in the bank and a several $1 million truck. And so it doesn't matter. Get on the road and you'll be able to figure it out.
How can people learn more about you and keep up with your awesome YouTube videos?
Dirt Sunrise is everything, so you can look up dirtsunrise.com, and then that'll have links to our YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and any information for us. But if you just Google even Dirt Sunrise, you'll find us.
Yeah, we try to do weekly videos if we can keep up with it and find Wi-Fi to upload. And then Instagram is more live time, where wherever we're at, whatever we're doing, we try and share on there as we travel. And then the videos are always about a month or two behind just because of the time to edit.
Are you guys ready to announce your next epic trip?
We'll be announcing it soon, probably in
I think within a week or
two, yeah.
The reason we're not at the moment is because it's changed so many times. Even just 2 months ago, about 3 months ago, we were heading to a different continent than we are now. And so with the world changing so much, we only want to announce it when it's for sure.
Yeah.
We don't want to be
excited to learn about where you're going. My bets are on Africa, just so you know.
Okay.
We'll see how that pans out.
Good.
Okay, so any more information you'd like to give or useful resources that our listeners should check out before we cut you loose?
Not that I can think of.
No, not that I can think of. There's so much good info out there nowadays that just start digging in, and you'll find everything you need, I think.
That's awesome. We really appreciate you guys' time, and we are very much looking forward to seeing where you are headed next.
It was great to catch up with you guys, and we're excited to follow along on your adventures.
Yeah, I can't wait. That's awesome, and congratulations.
Thank you. We appreciate it. I don't know about Lisa, but I am scared to death. But it seems really weird as I take the dog for a walk every morning. I think this is exactly where we wanted to be for so long. Why am I so scared? So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, believe me, that if you weren't scared, it would be illogical. So believe me, we were as well, and I think everyone.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we will let you guys go. We know you have lots of work to do, and thank you for your time today. And we're looking forward to catching up again, hopefully sometime again.
Sounds good. Good talking with you and good catching up.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Bye.